Hello, protocols, packets, and programs. Do you love code? Do something special this Valentine's Day. Whether your love is constant or variable, whether you have a type, and in whatever your language is, use a secure default. Support passkeys. Target a vuln class. Do something that makes an Appsec team feel lonely, forgotten, and unnecessary. Which means this week we chat with Scott Norberg about code scanning and trying to scale Appsec practices. Send flowers and stay tuned for Application Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show to learn the latest tools and techniques to understand DevOps, applications, and the cloud. Your trusted source for the latest Appsec news. It's time for Application Security Weekly. IT professionals, mark your calendars. Zero Trust World 2025 is happening in Orlando, Florida, February 19th to 21st. This event is tailored for IT leaders and cybersecurity experts who want actionable insights on zero trust strategies, practical solutions for modern threats, and meaningful connections with industry peers. Plus, take advantage of hands-on cyber hero boot camps, expert-led sessions, and the chance to earn CPE credits and your Cyber Hero certificate. Save $200 on your in-person registration using discount code ZTWSW25 at securityweekly.com/ZTW2025. Reserve your spot now.
This is episode 317, recorded February 10th, 2025. I'm your host, Mike Shima, and flying solo for this guest segment with Scott Norberg, who is a web security specialist with almost 20 years of experience in various technology and programming roles, specializing in web development and web security using Microsoft technologies. He has a wide range of experience in security, from working with dev teams on secure code techniques, software security assessments, and building Appsec programs. Hello, Scott. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, and thanks for having me.
So, Microsoft technologies. Now, my knowledge of C# is a bit dated. I know that Guns N' Roses wrote Sweet Child of Mine, and Prince wrote Little Red Corvette in C#. But obviously, those references are so very, very 80s. Bring me up to date. What kind of things are companies writing in .NET and C# today?
I think you can write almost everything in C# that you would write in any other language. From my understanding, C# is basically just Java that Microsoft said, I want that. The folks who were writing Java at the time said, you can't have that. And so then they said, okay, fine, we'll just make our own. And so they did. And so I would say anything you can write in Java, you can write in C#. The one caveat that I'll put to that is from everything that I can see, and I'm not a Java programmer, so don't write this in stone or anything. But from what I can see, the support for machine learning and AI is better in Java than it is in .NET. There are some things in .NET you can do with machine learning, but from, like I said, from what I can see, Java is more mature in that space.
Oh, I know just anecdotally, Python is one of the favors for machine learning and Gen AI today too. But we're here to talk about that .NET. And so, yes, a memory-safe language, and people write code. You know, you could use Java. Not everybody's Google and wants to start taking their version of Java. We could set that aside. But .NET, of course, you have that side of being a developer, being the Appsec side, and you're working with teams who are writing code. Code has flaws, and code scales pretty well, but people don't. And I think that's one of the themes that I wanted to tease out in this conversation with you, is that you ended up building your own scanner to look at C# code, to look at .NET. But before we talk about the scanner itself, tell us a little bit about, what got you that motivation, what led up to that, rather than just why didn't you just tell developers, write secure code and be done with it?
Well, actually, the reason why I started the scanner had nothing to do with helping developers. The reason why I started the scanner is I was trying to run a business. I found that I do a very bad job of being a soldier in someone else's army. I have to be leading the troops, or I have to be running my own thing. Otherwise, I feel very trapped. And so I was trying to grow a business, which is insanely hard.
Good luck.
I even have an MBA and know how important marketing is, and I'm still terrible at it. So I had a product idea. I was trying to sell the product. It was just people were interested in it, but they weren't not interested enough to pay for it, and I didn't know where to go next. And so I thought, okay, well, maybe one way to get interest in my product and get attention to my business is come out with a real analysis of SAST scanners.
Okay.
I did an apples to apples comparison of DAST scanners a few years ago, and found that the analyses that were out there at sectoolsmarket.com has one that's mediocre. Gartner stuff is trash. I'm sorry. It's just I don't. Anything Gartner says about AppSec is like you take it with a grain of salt, because I don't think that they're looking at the same things that I am, certainly. So I wanted to come out with an apples to apples comparison, saying, okay, so I have an intentionally vulnerable website with all sorts of different flavors of different vulnerabilities. So it's one thing to say that, oh, I catch SQL injection. But it's another thing to say, oh, I catch SQL injection these 8 different ways that developers might actually put it in. And I wanted to see which of the scanners would find which of the different flavors of vulnerabilities. And the scanners that I tried, which was 8, 10 of them, there were quite a few of them. And quite a few of them were even scanners that had a pretty good name in the AppSec industry. And most of them, as far as I'm concerned, fell flat on their face as far as the scan. I shouldn't say most fell flat on their face. Like, I had 3 really big name ones that just flat on their face, single digit. I had 150 vulnerabilities. They found single digit vulnerabilities. That's not okay.
Yeah, and what you're highlighting there too is because I have a background in building a DAST scanner myself, and I've seen like that challenge of, oh, here's a damn vulnerable web app, here's a web app with known vulnerabilities, but that challenge for scanners is do they even know, do they have the logic to find this type of test, but can they crawl it? There's a lot of things that are like, do they even crawl it? Can they authenticate to it? And from your perspective, or from like the owner's perspective of the website, does this website look like mine? Because developers can be creative, and that's what you need really, is a tool that works for your environment. And there's so many different ways that those environments can be strange and different. It's so hard to predict. So I mostly had to say that, not to defend any of those tools, but to very much empathize with just figuring out. It's one thing to say, oh, yeah, we have a SQL injection check. It's another thing to be able to scan, interact, and find that SQL injection. But I've interrupted you. Please carry on now. We've got a journey to complete.
One thing I wanted to say is, I did a DAST scan once, and I couldn't figure out why I wasn't authenticating, and I realized that the username and password were put in with editable divs. I was like, oh, that's why the DAST scanner couldn't understand that. Got it.
Yeah, well, okay, I'm going to have to go on my own tangent. The other thing is, too, we had someone run a DAST scanner against essentially a wiki, but they run an authenticated scan, and they came back and were asking why, if running as an admin, why did it change all of their pages? And that was also a long conversation about like, yes, we know how to authenticate, but what are you doing with an authenticated scanner against that app? And yeah. So let's find out what kind of consequences you've come through. Tell us more, Scott.
So 3 just fell. 3 of the scanners just fell flat on their face. What are you doing? I'm not even sure why you call yourself a DAST scanner. There were 5 or 6 that found some stuff. They found some things, but didn't really do anything close to a good job. There was one scanner that I thought was the minimum. Like, this found all of the lowest hanging fruit, but that was the best scanner. Found only the low hanging fruit, the really easiest stuff. And I didn't end up publishing it, largely because I didn't have the permission of all of the scanners to publish it. And I was missing a couple of scanners that I just couldn't get my hands on because they were too expensive. But it did raise the question in my mind, can I write a better one? And the odd thing is that for years and years, I'd been interested in building products, but it's like, I'm never going to build a SAS scanner because there's no way I could build a better one. But when I actually looked at what those scanners were doing, it was like, hey, I bet I could. So one of the nice things about C# is that Microsoft puts out its compiler API as code. So you can go in and actually look at the code as code, and do so in a compiler specific sort of way. So you're not trying to parse the code. You're actually understanding the code because you have the compiler API available to you. And so then I leveraged that to say, well, can I find instances? So going back to SQL injection, can I find instances of SQL injection using the compiler API? So then look at places where the command text is being set on a SQL command object. I don't have to look for the word command text. I can actually say, is the property command text being set of an object that is of type Microsoft.data.SQL command, or there might be SQL client in there, and there were 4 others. So I didn't have
and
to
that's
guess.
the key part, right? And what you're describing is that, everybody goes back to grep, just code as text. But if you're using grep and just treating it as text, you might hit like the word command or the word like a select, but it's in a comment, or it's not, it's in a constant, or it's something that doesn't have, it's not the token that is input value or a variable. But it sounds like, with .NET, you can walk that abstract syntax tree. That's, that's the AST. And that's, in my experience, that's what's been so helpful with something like semgrep, for example, the open source version. You have the AST, and your grep now doesn't have to work on text. It can actually work on the tokens and the semantic meaning of what you're interacting with. And I wanted to bring that up because you dove into, obviously, the compiler API presents that AST, but there are other tools out there. What was in your mind, what was the decision to not go down the semgrep route and write some rules rather than, start from scratch almost, if you will?
So that's actually news to me that semgrep has that type of analysis. When I had done the semgrep analysis and I looked at all the rules that we found this because of this rule, it looked like basically a human readable version of regular expressions, doing the exact opposite of what you just said, that it was just looking at the code as text and instead of analyzing it as code. And when you're doing that, you can't say, okay, going back to SQL injection and command text. So you have this variable on the right side of that. Where is that coming from? And if you're analyzing it as text, you can't say, give me all references. And then, all right, so that came from here. Give me all references to that. Give me all references to that. And that's something that I did with my tool. That is not something that I thought that semgrep can do. So I need to look into that because that's interesting. CodeQL can, but for me, part of the reason why I wrote my own scanner rather than doing that, going the CodeQL route, was just because I was already familiar with the Microsoft Compiler API. And
yeah, why not? Yeah.
And then the other part of it too, was of the scanners that I was working with, the only one that looked like was capable of doing that was CodeQL. So this is, and so, one of the things that I like to, maybe I repeat a little bit too much of what all of our guests are saying, but the idea here is that, you're a developer. This is coming from a developer perspective even, and what are you comfortable with? What are you familiar with? What's the easier developer experience? And a lot of this started, though, I think you were saying, there wasn't even a direct security need for what you were for the problem you were trying to solve. So, but it did come through security tools that you were looking at for this case. Tell us more about, we're still building up to the why you wrote it, but the problem that you were trying to solve too. Yeah, and when I'm running a SAS scanner, I want to find the most true positives with the fewest false positives with the least amount of effort possible. One of the reasons why I don't like writing rules is because I've typically been, again, when I wrote this, I was running my own business, didn't have any clients, so I was not in this situation. But when I am getting actually paid to do something, I've been in one of two situations. One of them is I'm a penetration tester. I have one app. I have 2 weeks to find as much stuff as I can. And as a penetration tester, I view it as my job not to find all of the instances of 3 different classes of vulnerabilities. It's to find as many different classes of vulnerabilities as I can.
Yes.
And the reason for that is going back to SQL injection, I find SQL injection in there. And then I can say, here's how you fix this one. And I can do just a quick 5-minute look to say, here, I found some more. But here's the pattern of what to look for. Here's the pattern of how to fix it. Then you can go in and find the rest of them, fix them yourselves, and then I can go look for other things. I personally don't want to spend time writing rules to find every single one, because you probably have other classes of vulnerabilities elsewhere, and I'd rather teach you how to fix everything, how to fix more things, rather than how to fix everything of just one class. So
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan for writing rules if I'm in a penetration testing scenario.
And that's really, we're definitely going to have to pull that out as a good clip about what, as a pen test, looking for the different classes rather than every single example. I would tie that to something like bug bounty even as well. Bug bounties are more useful when they're showing that, we missed this entire class versus here's an XSS, here's another XSS. Because in those examples, I would say put that burden, or those are more like using that security tool from the developer side as test cases for acceptance tests, if you will, or just finding where are all the other variants or mutations, if you will, of this one particular vulnerability that our pen tester found. Let's have them, I'm kind of describing in a way I might approach an Appsec program, rather than just being the pen tester doing all that tedious work. And hopefully that speaks to something that the way you're approaching building Appsec programs too, and using tools like this.
Yeah, and that goes to the other situation where I've been in when I've done scanning, is that I have hundreds of apps to look at. I've never been in a situation where I've been able to look at the source code of every app that I'm responsible for, and it's more than just 2 weeks. So in the situation where I've been managing apps, it's been hundreds of apps. And in those cases, not only can you not look at the source code for all of them, but in all of those cases, I don't even know what language some of those are written in. Because it's just, you just have too many. And in those cases, what I have to do, not because I want to, but because I have to. I just don't have, I'm only one person. I can only put in so many hours per day, is focus on, okay, so let's make sure that we're scanning everything with the tools that we have. Let's make sure that we're getting tools that have the highest number of true positives with the fewest number of false positives. And then let's just run the tools and then train the developers to make sure that they know what they're doing. But I just don't have time to look at the source code for one of hundreds of apps to write rules. So I'm sure that there are use cases out there for folks who want to write their own rules. I just don't know what they are because I've never personally encountered them.
Well, that's interesting, because to my mind, the rules are where the real richness in, and definitely there's that situation of here's a rule that is so customized because it's a very particular coding pattern that this one particular repo happened to use, and it doesn't scale well, or it's not reusable. So it's that reusability that definitely feels like, why did I spend so much time on this one rule? But I'm curious then, rules can still help with the idea of this is the vuln class we care about, or this is the type of vulnerability, because as you mentioned, nobody wants to miss things, but by the same token, nobody wants to turn the metaphor on and get a slew of CVEs and vuln findings just because every rule lit up. But these are like you just look at the type of like of output and sort of shrug your shoulders and be like, okay, this could maybe be exploited if the planets are aligned on a solar eclipse or something, but nobody cares. So I'm curious, as you were approaching your scanner, was there a particular class you had in mind? Or, you mentioned 150 vulns. I don't think that was 150 vuln classes. So tell us a bit about your thinking about what was important to you and why, and like how that reflected the apps you were potentially looking at.
Yeah, so you're right. 150 vulns wasn't 150 vuln classes, and it wasn't even 150 unique vulnerabilities. It was just 150 vulnerabilities in this website. And what I tried to do with the website to test against is that rather than say, oh, here's my SQL injection, it was, okay, here's SQL injection using the classic case where you're doing select star from table where plus user input plus close query. But then there's also in .NET, there's string.concat where you can go in and you put little placeholders where you want the text. There's string interpolation where you put brackets in there and you can actually put your variables inside your text. There's something called a string builder that you can put in information. There are cases where you do that one level above in the class that actually calls the SQL. Do all those things. And there were, I think, 2 or 3 other ways of building strings too. And that was the type of thing that I wanted to think through. It isn't just, did you find the easiest possible case? It's, okay, you found the easiest possible case, which not all the scanners did.
Also frustrating, yes.
Yes. Okay, you found the easiest possible case. Did you find the string interpolation? Did you find this? Did you find that other flavor? Did you find this other flavor? And so then the idea was to throw in, developers will do all sorts of different things. So trying to figure out, okay, so as a developer, what are the different ways that they might do this without going too crazy, without inventing something completely mind-boggling? What are the different ways developers do this and putting in those flavors? I actually used the same website for DAST scanning a few years ago. And with that, it was, okay, so if you show a developer cross-site scripting in a website, what's the first thing that they're going to do? They're going to try to remove script tags.
Oh.
So then, okay, so your DAST scanner can find it by sending alert 1. Will they test, recursive? So you send a script tag within a script tag. Will they do it uppercase? Will they do this? Will they do that? Because, again, developers might not go to encoding as their first defense. They'll try to remove the bad stuff.
I love that example because, and then what if they just do console log instead of, alert? There's a lot of ways that rather than, that's one of the dangers of just throwing tools over. And one of the things I appreciate is you haven't said shift left because it seems like such a vapid type of cliche. Because if you just say, oh, here's a tool, here's a bunch of payloads, don't let these payloads work, you get into exactly what you're describing where they, are denying script tags or filtering out alert, but forgetting that this isn't input validation. That's one of my pet peeves. So I'm going to go on a slight rant about that. It's about output encoding in the context of where you're dropping this. Is this a DOM node? Is it a text node? This is HTML. What's happening here? So it's funny how a lot of these just basic concepts come out of the idea of I wanted to write my own tool, because one of the things you're also describing with all the different ways that a string could be put together. Sure, maybe if you enjoy regular expressions, you could mostly figure out some fancy ways to grep for those patterns. But if you can work with the AST and you know that these are tokens of delimiters and the string, etc., life is so much easier. but life maybe isn't easier when you're actually working with this API. I want to jump over with a little bit of time left. How did you write the code itself? So you're working with probably, I think, the Roslyn compiler. Is that the name of the .NET? Yep. What was it like? Just you're now a developer. You're writing code. How long did it take you to cobble this together?
3 weeks.
Not bad.
3 weeks to write a scanner better than these vendors that are charging 4 and 5 figures for their scanner. Yeah, I don't think I couldn't have done it without ChatGPT though.
Interesting. Okay.
So one of the challenges with Roslyn, the Microsoft Code Compiler, is that it's not documented very well. I was a speaker at a conference in Florida a couple of years ago, and I spoke to folks who had written books on the compiler, and I asked them, "So, is there good documentation on this?" They said, "No." Here are a couple of tools that we use to
to be fair, where is good documentation? It tends to be rare, but I think your point still stands. Yeah.
It's even worse than most.
Oh dear.
Yeah. So. And nobody asks questions on it in Stack Overflow and things like that. So yes. It's hard to figure out. And so what I ended up doing was just asking ChatGPT, "Hey, I'm using Roslyn. I'm trying to do this, this, and this. Can you give me the code to do that?" And it would. And it was almost always wrong the first time.
Okay.
But it was never way off.
But I guess not close. Wrong in a way, like clearly wrong in a way that you couldn't commit it would start running, but it sounds like it was wrong in a way that at least pointed you in the right direction or was helpful, because it sounds like you actually relied on it and used it rather than just threw up your hands and now got frustrated and wanted to write your own LLM because this LLM wasn't working for you.
Yeah, it got me in the right direction.
Okay.
And sometimes it would be just simple things like missing a return statement. It has a method. Okay. There's no return here. Okay, well, I can fix that. The other thing that I ran into, and this is not something that I anticipated, but it is something that I probably should have anticipated if I thought about it, is that since ChatGPT doesn't know the context of the larger code, it doesn't know how to fit it in. It just gives you the solution. And so if all I did was take the ChatGPT code, dump it into my code, I would have ended up with this spaghetti code monstrosity that I could not maintain. That actually happened. I was a week in, and I had a couple of classes of vulnerabilities in, and I was trying to add another one, but the crawling wasn't quite working to find all references to one of the things that I wanted to make sure is, can I prove that this is actually coming from the UI? Okay. And the way that worked with cross-site scripting is actually very different than SQL injection. And so what I wanted in adding cross-site scripting is like, oh, am I breaking SQL injection? Like, I don't know. Because I have this cobbled together thing over here that I'm now afraid to update. So then I had to rethink how I was architecting it, and then rethink how I was testing it. And I ended up using a lot of the same code, but I ended up refactoring some things too to make sure that it all fit together, that it worked as a cohesive whole. Gotcha. And that is a big danger of using ChatGPT, is that, like I said, it doesn't understand the big picture. And if all you're doing is cobbling together stuff, yeah, you could move quickly.
But good luck trying to maintain it.
Yeah, it's like running into the ocean. It's easy at first, and then the further you get in, the harder it gets.
Yeah, and I like that as an example, because even through 2024, been always searching for where are ChatGPT or Gen AI, where is it helpful to AppSec in general? And I'm still skeptical. I haven't seen a deep value in Gen AI as an AppSec tool, but I will acknowledge the development help. And here it just sounds like a great substitute, or there's probably a better word for this, that is a replacement for a lack of documentation that helped you, who still had the intelligence, the human intelligence necessary to put this scanner together. One of the other things I wanted to, there's a theme here too of the idea that, you writing your own tool, that maybe, to bring in some hypotheticals, maybe that tool will also fall flat in some other environment because it's still .NET, but the coding styles are different. And I wanted to tease out more that broader discussion of the idea of, here's a tool not built here, or that build versus buy is the cliche I'm trying to avoid using, that I have to get out there just to kind of make my question clear. But was there an aspect of this that you went through, or you had to justify, I guess maybe to anyone other than yourself, about here's the time to invest in a tool that hopefully will be better? Or maybe at what point did you say, if maybe this answers itself, it only took 3 weeks, but you said, oh, this is actually going to be viable, rather than tweaking a vendor, tweaking another open source project out there perhaps that might work better for your environment?
Yeah, if I had been working for a company at the time and had been given the same problem, I don't know that I would have had the same solution. I think I might have, getting back to the original, I'm either doing a pen test and I only have one app but a very short amount of time, and I have hundreds of apps. In that situation, I just want the scanners to find something. I'm honestly not
be a
looking
useful
at
tool.
the results.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so building a tool to find more vulnerabilities when the biggest problem is just making sure that we're scanning it all isn't really a good use of anybody's time. If I were to get to the point where, now we're starting to look at the results. Now we're starting to make sure that our tools are actually doing the things that they're saying they're doing, which is finding out most of them don't. But if you're getting to that point and validating that, then I think you do have to do a cost benefit analysis to see how far away are we. Because it's one thing to say, so I'll just say that Sneak was the one that found all of the low-hanging fruit. So if you're using a SemGrep with the default rules, which didn't do so well in my comparison, then you have the choice between, well, do we write some rules? Do we move to Sneak? Do we write our own tool? And then in that case, I would make the argument that, yeah, you're probably looking at writing your own rules or moving to Sneak long before you touch building your own software. But if you're looking at this and you're seeing we only found 25 out of our 150, and if we write our own rules, we can get up to 40 out of those 150, but we really want those 150. In that case, then you're stuck with building a tool. It just depends on the problem you're trying to solve and how closely you're looking at what your tools are actually doing.
Yeah, and I would add how closely your test reference, those 150 vulns represent the vulns both you care about and that are reflected in the code bases you're looking at. Because the last thing you want to do is spend, 3 weeks isn't too bad, but spend that time to make your test cases work, but then it doesn't find it out in the real world. But that will be the last thing I say, as we don't have 3 weeks, unfortunately, just about 30 minutes. You mentioned scanning it all, which is 3 words. And that comes to my mind as a reminder, we always have to ask our guests, how would you describe AppSec in 3 words? So Scott, give us your response to that. Help us out.
So I think my 3 words would be following the crowd. And the reason why I say that is this is my 3rd career, and I'm also in other groups as a hobbyist, and each of those groups has their own unique, what they look for, what they don't, the things that they strive to do, and the things they say that's not important. And one of the things that strikes me about AppSec more than the other groups that I've worked with is that in the AppSec crowd, we tend to just take things for granted. Like, oh, we ran have a tool, we got results, those results must be good. Or OWASP. OWASP says this, OWASP is our best organization, then that must fit our environment. And I would really love to see the AppSec world question things more, really look at OWASP. Is it doing what we need? Look at the tools. Are they doing what they need? And start pushing for better.
Start pushing for better. I just want to end it there but I'm so resisting just to jump onto what you're saying, because it's getting me fired up in the sense of, do we need another top 10 list, or what's the outcome we're looking for? If we talk about secure design, that is a wonderful thing, and it's a topic that I'm honestly going to be returning to throughout all of 2025. But from the perspective of, what are the practical takeaways? What does it mean to say secure design, and so on and so on? So I absolutely love following the crowd as perhaps more of a warning rather than a theme. So I guess the lemmings part goes unmentioned in your 3 words there, Scott.
I tried going for something to inspire rather than
something to inspire. Yes,
rather than some alternatives.
No, I hear you. That's what we love about the 3 words have been very very helpful in that sense to get people thinking, and hopefully something that does inspire a positive, constructive change within AppSec about what are we building and why. And speaking of building, I will throw in a link to your project, the codesheriff.net. That will put that into the show notes so everybody can go check out another open source project. And with that, Scott, I just want to say thank you for joining us for this conversation. It was fun.
Yeah, it was fun for me too. Thanks for having me.
Thanks again, Scott. Thanks for everyone who stuck around. We're going to take a quick break now and return with news of the week.